Order accepted.
When using a layout like the core, one of the biggest advantages is fast and easy access to all 10 control groups. For most players, using that many control groups is a new skill to develop. Here are our suggestions for all 10 control groups. Keep in mind that this is just a starting point. You'll probably develop the way you use your control groups to suit your own style over time. First off, we strongly suggest using 2 macro control groups. One of the most common action sequences for Protoss is checking production. That means checking the cooldowns on your warp gates as well as the queues in your Nexus, Robo, and Stargate. The core is designed to make this checking process as quick as possible by putting both macro control groups in the home row. On the primary macro control group, bind your Nexus as well as all upgrade structures. This serves 2 purposes. First, to remind you of your probe production when you're checking your upgrades, and to remind you of your upgrades when you're producing probes. Second, to allow you access to your upgrades without having to know where they are or go back to your base. This is useful both for checking your upgrades to see when it's time to make an attack, and for queuing up your next upgrade so that you can keep them going. On the secondary macro control group, bind your warp gates, gateways, robotics facilities, and stargates. To check how close units are to completion in your gateways, robos, and stargates, just click on the wireframe. This may seem awkward at first, but in time it will become natural and easy. Remember that the goal is to queue up the next unit just before the current one finishes. Now, the trick to using one control group for 3 production structures is to know the selection priority. For these structures, warp gates and gateways will always be first, followed by stargates, if available, then robo facilities. So, if you always use previous subgroup to get to your robos, and next subgroup to get to your stargates, it doesn't matter which of the 3 structures you have, you can count on the correct structure being selected. The one exception is when you have gateways that have yet to be turned into warp gates. In this case, it's always 2 next subgroup presses for stargates, and accessing robos remains unchanged. Next up, we have 8 micro control groups. The first objection that is often raised against using so many control groups for micro is that it would take forever to press 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A, 6A, 7A, 8A. But there's no need to do that. The first 2 we'll use for the main army. The rest will grant us added utility when the time calls for it. Our first main army control group is for melee units. This means Zealots, Archons, and DTs that have been mixed into the army for extra damage. DTs and Zealots out harassing should not be in this control group. Having a melee control group as Protoss solves 3 major control problems that exist with the one main army control group method. First, you can keep your melee units in front so they don't get stuck inside your death ball, unable to do any damage. Second, you're able to kite with your range units without sacrificing the DPS of your melee units. Third, when you use Force Field, you can easily pull back and hold position with your melee units while your ranged units safely deal with the enemy trapped behind the Force Field. There are a lot of other small advantages you'll discover when you learn to use a melee control group, but these are the major ones. Keep in mind that you will sometimes want your Archons in the range control group. This is a good example of why you should always keep an open mind and stay flexible, adjusting your control groups for the situation. Our second main control group army is for ranged units. This means Sentry, Stalker, Immortal, Colossus, Void Ray, and Carrier for the most part. Tempest can go in this control group as well, but sometimes you'll want them in their own control group, as getting Tempest caught out of position can be a game-ending mistake. Again, we run into selection priority. We don't want anything above a Sentry in selection priority to be in this control group. This way, whenever we select a range control group, we have our Sentry spells ready to go. This means no Mothership, Mothership Core, or High Templar in the ranged control group. Next, we have our High Templar control group. High Templar are special because they do not have an attack. Were you to put them in the melee or ranged control group, they would march forward to their death in an attempt to hug the enemy with every attack move command you issue. Having them in their own control group allows you to do what you like with your main army without having to worry about the High Templar. For easier army movement, have your High Templar control group follow the slowest unit in the range control group by right-clicking. Next we have the Mothership Core / Mothership control group. Having a separate control group for the Mothership Core is very useful. You won't need to look back at your Mothership Core to hit the Nexus cannon. Just jump to the base being harassed, press the Mothership Core control group, and cannon up the Nexus. Similar to the Tempest, getting caught out of position with a Mothership or Mothership Core can really put you behind. Keeping it safe by positioning it individually where appropriate is very effective. Additionally, this allows fast casting from both the Mothership Core and the Sentry. For easier army movement, again, have the Mothership Core or Mothership follow the slowest ranged unit by right-clicking. Next, we have the only clone unit group, Stalker. Stalkers are both in the ranged units control group and in their own special control group. You can use this control group to target fire units like Vikings or Corruptors, but keep in mind the number of Stalkers it takes to kill each unit you are target firing, as using too many will waste damage from your Stalkers and can hurt you more than help you in bigger battles. This is also useful when defending drops or air harass. You can send your Stalkers to deal with the harass while your main army stays in position to defend a potential 2-pronged attack. Finally, our last 3 control groups are dedicated to harass and general utility. drops, Phoenix, Oracles, DTs, Tempests, counterattacks, flanking groups, scouts, etc. Whatever you can think of, these 3 control groups are to be used flexibly to suit your current needs. Theoretically, a player that mastered all of these control groups could be executing 3 different harass attacks while controlling the main army and spellcasters, something almost never seen in a game of Starcraft today. The most important thing to remember is that different situations will call for different control group setups. Use this as your base and be ready to adjust for different strategies and unit composition, both from yourself and from your opponent. My name is Jack Attack, and as always, thanks for watching. If you have an idea for a video you would like us to do, please leave it with any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, or anything beginning with the letter C in the comment section below, and we'll see you again soon.